Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwayne McFarland.
All across fantasy land, what's going on? It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. I am Brian Drake of FightingChanceFantasy.com, joined as always by my main man, Dwayne McFarland of Pro Football Focus and EstablishTheRun.com. And that noise you hear, that's not your running back's bones breaking. Nope, that's us cracking a beer on a new episode of The Hustle. Dwayne, there's so much to talk about.
Let me see if we hear anything, Drake. Oh, that was what was left of the Rojo Truthers juice. It just fizzled out.
Oh, I tweeted that this weekend. I go, to all you Rojo fanboys, the party's over. It's done. Give it up. But it is the Fantasy Football Hustle. Thanks for joining us. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. And we'd love for you to leave some comments on the YouTube page. That's kind of our new thing now. Tell us who you're adding with your waiver claims, who you want us to talk about, who you're going to be dropping, who you want us to talk about in future episodes. So, Dwayne, it was, as I titled this episode, Running Back Armageddon. There are going to be holes in, easy for me to say, holes in rosters all across fantasy football. Saquon Barkley went down. He's done for the year. Christian McCaffrey went down. He could be out 4 to 6 weeks. Raheem Mostert's going to be down a little bit. We saw Cam Akers go down. We'll get to the receivers and everybody else later, but fantasy football is about running backs, my friend. If you were a Barkley owner, if you were a McCaffrey owner, Dwayne, tell the folks, where are you going with your top waiver claim?
Yeah, I mean, I think at running back, you have to start with Darrell Henderson this week. And for me, it's a few reasons why. Number one, we know he was a second round pick last year. So they do have something, invested in the guy. He flashed finally. Last year, yes, he was absolutely terrible, could never get on the field. But with Malcolm Brown, getting the injury, he's still going to probably play this weekend. But we thought that with Damian Harris. Remember when we thought, it's just a pinky, no big deal. And then he went, it's so easy for teams now to put these guys on IR because they can bring them back, in a shorter period of time. So I'm not sure Malcolm Brown's out of the woods yet. Coaches typically say right away, they're going to play next week. We heard that with Kittle, right? Early on, I think they just want to keep the other team basically guessing about the game plan. As soon as Kittle's not going to be in, right? It's like, okay, what are we going to do? We just got to take away the run game, and who cares about anything else? So coaches play those games all the time. So we'll see with Malcolm Brown. But, Cam Akers, they were trying to give him the opportunity. And honestly, he just hadn't shown enough yet. And then Henderson gets in and he does show. So for me, that backfield it could still be a committee, but I think there's still a chance, Drake, that one person could basically take it over. McVay has continued, to say that while we like using, multiple guys, the idea, his ideal state would be one player to take it. And so for me, Henderson's the young guy that has the best chance to not only give you maybe a couple of weeks while the other guys get healthy, but he's the guy that could actually take over, his backfield, and their offense looks really good.
Henderson gets Buffalo this weekend, so could be a case of a guy you're adding, you put him in your lineup, and you're like, oh, great, he crapped the bed, sort of like the Benny Snell, Nyheim Hines, fab splashes folks made last weekend. So that's McKinnon. He looked pretty good. Now, I'm a big fan of Mike Davis. Because if you lost Christian McCaffrey, you saw Mike Davis come in. He's down 4 to 6 weeks, Dwayne. I did a little quick 5-minute waiver wire pod. If you're on our YouTube channel, check that out. It's something hopefully we do going forward to just give you a quick preview of what we're going to talk about here. What do you think about him? He's going to be a real good passing game threat. He went and he caught all 8 of his targets for 74 yards. Here's my rationale on him. If he can turn 40 rushing yards, this is a floor. 40 rushing yards and catch 6 for 60. That's 16 PPR points before we even talk about any touchdowns. But there's also this thought of maybe Curtis Samuel takes some snaps because he played some running back at Ohio State. He had 4 on Sunday. What are your thoughts on Mike Davis? Where would you slot him in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, Samuel did see more work in the backfield. So I think that's going to be that will be a thing, but I don't think it's going to be, a ton. Like, I think obviously Mike Davis isn't going to get Christian McCaffrey's workload. So I think they'll try to sprinkle in some other guys. I don't really have anybody else. So I think Samuel's just kind of like, hey, dude, it's you. But it'll really be more like he just has a second back that's on the field, like 10% of the time. I mean, so I think people are blowing that out of proportion just because they think, oh, it's a receiver and he's going to eat in. Well, okay, but who else is there? I mean, so fine. Say Curtis Samuel's their running back 2. Mm-hmm. And he gets 20% of the snaps. It's like, so what? 80% still going to Mike Davis. And to your point, he's going to be great, in PPR format. So here's my thought on Mike Davis. I have him ranked number 3. We'll go back to McKinnon because number 1 was Darrell Henderson. So Mike Davis, the reason I have him below McKinnon and the reason I have him below Darrell Henderson is there's no chance, right, that he takes over the job for the year. But if what you're looking for is, if you're the McCaffrey owner and the rest of your backs are set, Davis may be your bet, right? Like, so in my situations where I own McCaffrey, I had Mike Davis on my roster, and hopefully people were drafting him because in deeper leagues, because it's a guy that we did talk about a few times that we were kind of like, hey, here's the guy nobody's talking about, but you can get him late. But with Mike Davis, if you're just trying to get through the McCaffrey injury, or you're looking at something like maybe you had Mostert and you're thinking, man, I think Mostert will be back in 3 to 4 weeks. I just need somebody to get me through that period. Then I think Mike Davis is the guy that's the best bet to give you the most points over the next 2 to 4 weeks. We'll see. McCaffrey's saying he's going to try to come back sooner than that, but all players say it. Yeah. If McCaffrey comes back too soon, it could, be a risk, to him, and that could actually make Mike Davis viable even longer. So I think it's a roster construction thing, Drake. So it's not just roster construction when you're in a draft, right? It's also the way you handle your fab. And so from a strategy perspective, you've got to look at your team and you got to think about, what it is that you need. But what I would say is the more starters you have on a team, like, so if you play in a deep league or even a shallow league, but you start, multiple flex options, especially if you're in a 12-person league and, you've got 2 flex spots. In those cases, you got to remember other injuries are going to occur. So while Mike Davis may seem really appealing and you're like, I just use him for 2 to 4 weeks. In those cases, I probably am still going to lean to Henderson and McKinnon because I know how valuable it is to to be able to have, even if one of those guys turns into more than just, a couple of week filler later in the season, to have those guys in your flex spots, down the stretch can really be huge. Whereas I don't think we're going to get that from Mike Davis. So I think folks got to look at their roster. They got to think through their scoring format. And then they've got to make a call based on that.
I'll be honest with you folks out there. In my number 1 league against all my college buddies, I do have the top waiver claim. And right now I've got a claim in for Mike Davis. I'm looking at it in terms of, hey, I think this guy can be a good flex for me for 4 weeks. I'm looking at it as a week-to-week league. I'm 1-1. My team's scoring a lot of points. But I'm open to being swayed tonight. This guy's not on my waiver wire, but he might be on yours. And he's Dwayne's number 2 running back ad for the weekend. It's Jerick McKinnon of the 49ers. Now, it might be hard to believe that he's the healthiest runner in the backfield between Mostert and Coleman, but he is. And he looked very good. I mean, the jet was flying all over the field, 55-yard touchdown. They also have Jeff Wilson Jr., and they also got this kid, JaMycal Hasty. You and I were talking before the show, is we don't know what this is going to be. Are they going to just kind of have the same offense that they always do? Is Wilson going to fill in the Mostert role? I mean, what are they going to do? So McKinnon is going to have a huge role, I think, for the rest of the season, but I don't know. I mean, this team is so banged up.
Yeah, last year, and I'm pulling up something right now because you just kind of triggered it for me. But last year, we had this scenario come up. Tevin Coleman was hurt, and everybody thought it was going to be like Matt Breida week, if you remember this.
Yeah, me. I own Matt Breida.
Oh, hey, it wasn't just you. It was me too. So I'm looking for I got last year's utilization report pulled up. So I'm looking for that, kind of here on the fly. But yeah, so there was that week where Coleman went down from a standpoint of, okay, looks like, weeks 2 and 3. Coleman got hurt in week 1. Oh, that's almost the same as this year. He didn't play any snaps on week 2 and week 3. And everybody went nuts, for Matt Breida. And everybody thought, oh, Breida's going to come in and get, all of that Tevin Coleman work and then maybe a little extra. And he didn't. Mm-hmm. It was actually, that was when, Jeff Wilson, became a thing. And so then it was Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, and Matt Breida all still splitting. And so we don't know if they're going to do that again, but we know if there's one coach that will do it, it's Kyle Shanahan. Like he does it all the time. So what I will say to your point, and the reason I have McKinnon number 2 is because it's an amazing, run game. I mean, we've talked about it. If people listen to The Hustle, they know how much we think about, the Shanahan scheme. I've been writing about it for like 10 years. So it's an amazing scheme. They've got a good offensive line, and their defense is not going to be very good. So there's also the opportunity that if McKinnon, which he's already shown us, now Coleman does get involved too, but if McKinnon is really going to be the passing down back, there's upside, right? And the 49ers script's changing. They're not going to lead everybody and just get to run everything down everybody's throat in the fourth quarter this year as they have to start playing tougher teams. They won't get to do what they did against the Jets. So I think McKinnon, one, even if everybody comes back and he doesn't show that he's worth being on the field more over these next couple of weeks, he still gives you the PPR value down for the rest of the season. Number 2, he could show enough to move up in the pecking order, maybe become the guy that's getting 40 to 50%, because to your point, he looked tremendous. And that could be what they need him to do anyway. If they're trailing, right? Then it's not just about being on the field for if you're all of a sudden you're passing 65, 70% of the time, where last year you were passing 50% of the time. Well, that immediately inflates Jerick McKinnon's, snaps, everything, which means when you audible to a run in that situation, he can run for like a 40-yard draw play for a first down, like he did this last week against the Jets, which was ridiculous. So it's really talent, it's scheme. That's why he's number 2. And I think he's got a PPR floor no matter what. You could talk me into trading him out with Darrell Henderson. I just think the Rams offense looks really good right now. And the 49ers, just like everybody's dropping like flies, So it's like, okay, what's going to happen with Garoppolo, even though Mullen's fine. And he's shown to be capable in that offense before.
It's funny. I look back at my home league draft that I always reference on the show here. My final 2 picks in that draft were Devonta Freeman and Jerick McKinnon. Neither of them are on my roster right now.
Man, you had it, Drake. You had the intuition,
I had it. And so speaking of one of those guys, that would be Devonta Freeman, who today just signed with the New York Football Giants. This is kind of a muddied backfield, Dwayne. It's Devonta Freeman, Dion Lewis, and Wayne Gallman. So last year in 14 games with Atlanta, Freeman ran 184 times for 656 yards and only 2 touchdowns. That's a little over 3.5 yards per rush. He did catch 59 of his 70 targets, though, for 410 yards and 4 touchdowns. This line is bad. This team is bad. If Saquon Barkley can't do it behind this line, why do I think Devonta Freeman off his couch can?
Yeah, I don't know how much I think about it, either, just because I don't know what to think about Freeman, anymore. I liked it better before they signed him, and I was willing just to say, you know what? I don't think Wayne Gallman's really any good. They basically just want to keep him inactive every week. Even last year when Barkley went down, remember, he came in that one game and did good, and then the next game sucked, and then basically they just said, look, dude, we're not going to, you're not even get to dress out like for the rest of the year. And then that happened in week 2 here. They didn't have him dress out. So there's something going on with Wayne Gallman and that coaching staff. It's almost like, well, we spent this 4th round pick on you, so we're not going to release you, but not really sure that they trust him that much, Drake. So my thought process here is I would have been fine with it just being Dion Lewis, because this is another team that's going to trail. They're passing right now on 70. They're dropping back to pass on 77%. For freaking plays. They're running 68 and 65 plays a game, which is slightly, it's right at the league average, but it's not typical Jason Garrett old school, with the Cowboys when he was running, 56, 57 plays. So, I mean, it's at least, and if their time of possession improve, they could be up at like a, 75%, or so. I mean, because if you look at it right now, Drake, they've ran no huddle 59% of the snaps in week 1. They ran it 20% of the time in week 2. Like, that's not a staple of Garrett. So he's trying to show this different gear, trying to get them, lined up to get Daniel Jones looks quickly, not let defenses sub out, all that kind of stuff. So there's some decent tempo. And I would have liked Dion Lewis in that scenario, right? They're going to mostly pass anyway. Lewis will be the receiving back. And if you're in a PPR league, my thought was, man, this guy could catch 5, 6, 7 balls a week. even if he only gets 10 attempts. And Lewis has still got some capability in the open field. He's not a guy you want banging through the tackles over and over and over. So I think what's going to happen now, though, is it sucks because Freeman is probably going to be the early down back. My guess is Lewis will be the long down and distance back. So third and fourth, 7+ yards will be Lewis. I also think Lewis will be the 2-minute offense. I think this first week, you probably get a little bit more out of Lewis. You may see a little bit more of Gallman just with Freeman, learning, the playbook. So you might squeeze a little bit more out of Dion Lewis this week. But I think it's going to be, a committee. And here's my problem with Freeman. Do you really want to own a first and second down back and an offense that's throwing the ball 77% of the time and they trail all the time and they don't get down inside the 5 that often? It's like, I don't really know what, unless Devonta Freeman takes this whole backfield over and becomes Barkley light, which could happen, he's been biding his time, man, and waiting for the spot where he can sign. So he's probably looking to prove something. Giants offensive line's not terrible, but I don't know what your thoughts are. I don't have a good feeling about it. I feel like it's going to be a committee. I'm fine if you want to put 15%, of your fab. The guys we talked about earlier, like Darrell Henderson, I'm willing to go upwards of 25%, depending on what you need to do in your league. McKinnon's in that 25% range, but willing to go a little higher if you need. Mike Davis, if you're the McCaffrey owner, you know what you got to do. So I don't need to tell you. But if you're not the McCaffrey owner, I'm not quite putting that much on Davis unless, to your point, Drake, you've said, you know what, here's my situation. I just need this guy for 3 or 4 weeks until something else pops loose. And I'm just trying to win these next 3 games. So to win Davis, though, you're probably have to put 25, 30%. So where I'm at with Freeman, I'm not at that high. I'm thinking 20%. I would have put 30% on Dion Lewis before Mike Davis got signed. And not because I think Dion Lewis is great. I just think the way the offense is running, fine, give him 10 first and second down carries. He gets another 5 on fourth, on third down and long. And then, he gets 7 to 8 targets a week. And now that's gone. So
let's extrapolate
Lewis, though,
this.
I would say 5% would be what I put on Lewis, and he's still the guy. I think I'd rather own Lewis at 5% than Freeman at 15 to 20.
Yeah. So let's stretch this out here for the rest of the season. Is there a possibility that Freeman becomes this every down back for the Giants and we look foolish saying, we don't really want him? Sure, that's a possibility. But there's a reason he was on the street. There's a reason Atlanta didn't want him anymore. I don't want to say, hey, he's a washed up bum, but, he's not what he used to be. And, he gets nicked up. He missed a couple of games last year. The year before, I think he only played 2 games. If anything, in this Giants offense, now that Sterling Shepard is going to miss some time too, I think the biggest bump of all goes to Evan Ingram. I think Ingram's going to do well. I bet Golden Tate is sitting in your waiver wire. So look for those guys. And if you don't get Freeman, don't worry. I would say maybe you want to stash Lewis at the end of your bench just to see what happens.
Yeah,
somebody we mentioned
for Freeman, Drake. He could give
What's
you
that?
80. It could happen for Freeman, right? He could give you 80% of Saquon Barkley. The problem with Barkley is, he struggles to operate within the scheme. He wants to turn everything into a big play. So technically, if you put a back in there that just does what they're supposed to, just follows the blocks, does their thing, they can probably still get, 75 to 80% of what Barkley got. I'm with you. I just don't know that Freeman's going to get all of that. So 15 to 20%, though, is what I would put on Freeman. If you're thinking you want him, I wouldn't overpay.
We talked about this guy last week, but he still might be hanging out on your waiver wires. And as Joshua Kelly of the Chargers, he's owned in 40% of Yahoo leagues. But, hey, that means 60% of them, he's available. So he's a guy who had 23 carries on Sunday. He only ran for 2.7 yards per carry. So, he's not blowing anybody away, but he's getting the touches. He's getting the goal line work. Dwayne was on him in the preseason. If he's out there, Dwayne, where do you prioritize him in the mix of all these backs?
Yeah, for me, when I look at Kelly, I think I've got, so my 1 is Henderson, my 2 is McKinnon, 3 is Mike Davis. I would actually put Kelly 4, and Freeman 5. So they're right there together. But the reason why is that Kelly is already, basically taken over what was Gordon's role. Now, Justin Jackson could come back, and that is a threat. It could happen. But Kelly's the guy they just drafted. Has he gained a ton of yards per carry? Yeah, but we know how yards per carry works, dude. I mean, half of it is how much did your line block, versus how much did you gain after contact. Like when I'm watching the guy play, like I don't look at him and think, oh, this is this slow grinder that sucks. Like I look at him and I'm like, wow, like this guy, he's got pop, he's got some juice. He's playing against, some loaded boxes. I mean, things aren't necessarily easy whenever you have a defense that says, hey, we're going to basically make your quarterback beat us, which is going to be the case. They're going to say that about Justin Herbert, and they're going to say that about Tyrod Taylor.
Just going to ask you that. How does Kelly's outlook change depending on the quarterback? And I have no idea why you would ever go back to Tyrod Taylor.
His doesn't. It's Eckler's that changes. I mean, because Eckler's the pass receiving back, and I mean, it changes a little bit because Kelly did get involved, in the passing game, this past weekend. If you look at it, here's what it's at, for, the season, Drake. It's 57% of the snaps to Eckler, 36% of the snaps to Josh Kelly in the backfield. In close scenarios, meaning the game's within 3, either way, 53% to Eckler, 41% to Josh Kelly. Passing snaps, it's Eckler, 66%, 24% to Josh Kelly. But on run snaps, 48% Eckler, 48% Kelly. Inside the 5, 14% Eckler, 86% Kelly.
Hello.
4-minute offense, meaning you're trying to grind the other team down. 0% Eckler, 100% Josh Kelly. 3rd and long, or 4th and long, 77% Eckler. 2-minute offense, 92% Eckler, only 8% Kelly. So it's pretty clear what they want to do. They're going to basically split the carries. Eckler is going to get more of the receiving work, but Kelly is going to get the carries down inside the 5, the high leverage. And if they're trying to salt away a win, which they were trying to do this last week because they did play ahead quite a bit, against the Chiefs, that's where all those carries came from. That's how he ended up with 23 attempts this past week. The other thing, that I'll say about this team that I like, unlike last year, they don't walk up to the line and literally drain the whole clock. A lot of that was Rivers, doing his thing, calling his audibles, trying to get everything perfect. Kid. Yep. Defense calls their audible. He audibles again, all that crap, which don't get me wrong. That stuff can be great, but that's gone now. And so their pace is actually up from where it was last year. So that's a plus, right, for both backs. Cause we just want the volume. Look, we'd rather have, a good quarterback, but in the case where you can't have a good quarterback, we'll just take the volume. But they've ran 74 and 83 plays in the first 2 weeks. That's 157 total, Drake. So that's 3rd in the league. They're running the 3rd most plays in the league. And
which we thought this was going to be a slow, grinded out offense.
Right. But it's not. And the reason why is because you don't have Rivers up there doing all that crap. They get to the line and they call the play. They may have one audible and it's you kill one thing, or you flip the run play, but you're not doing all the other, giving assigned a third, to still home, and bunt and like all that crap like you see in baseball. That's all gone because Rivers is gone.
Hey, if you're watching on YouTube, I'd love for you to go to that comments box. Let us know who you're using your waiver claim on. We'd love to check that out. And we have such great fans who come into the chat room live and they ask us questions. And we're going to get to the questions. Don't worry. We just want to get through kind of the news and notes. But I see you guys out there leaving your questions for Dwayne and I, and we'll definitely hit them. A couple more running backs that we want to touch on. Myles Gaskin could still be out there for the Dolphins. Gets the Jaguars on Thursday Night Football. Wasn't a flash in the pan from week 1. He was out there again, Dwayne, looking okay, I guess. Kind of blowing the doors off the other 2 jamokes on the Dolphins.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear, at this point. We talked about him last week. I still kind of feel the same. I will say that he did show – I thought he showed a little bit more this last week, as far as, making plays. I thought it was an improvement. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, he showed a little bit more. But, yeah, overall, I mean, again, are you excited about the Dolphins' offense?
No.
I know. It's just, man, they're going to trail all the time. Now, here's the good news, right, is on passing downs, he gets 73% of the snaps. So, essentially, if you want like a kind of a low ceiling but I don't want to say high floor, but like medium floor guy, Myles Gaskin's your guy because he's going to be on the field a lot because of what they want him to do. That's the game scripts they're in, right?
You got the 10th waiver pick in your league, and you're down. You're not going to get any of these other guys putting a claim into Myles Gaskin.
Yeah. I mean, he's getting inside the 50% of the work. He's 40% of the run snaps, but 73% of the pass. Third and long, 70%. 2-minute offense, 83%. He's what we thought Matt Breida would be.
Mm-hmm.
And so now that I saw a little bit more sizzle from him, this week, and maybe part of week one was, I didn't go back and watch enough of him, to be honest. But this week I saw him on more plays. Maybe he showed more of that on week one, and I just was being, stupid about it.
Two kind of real deep league plays at running back. Devontae Booker and Darwin Thompson, guy we talked about off air. We're not sure, but we saw there's an ankle injury to my BFF, Darrell Williams. So we're not sure what his status is going to be going forward. The teams don't have to give an injury designation until Wednesday. We record on Tuesday nights, obviously. So a couple of deep league speculations. Any thoughts on those two?
Yeah, I mean, Thompson's just, a 1%, 2%, 3% type thing. And you throw him on the roster, and if for some reason Williams is out for 3 or 4 weeks, and then, Clyde Edwards-Helaire goes down this weekend, don't want it to happen, but let's say he missed 2 weeks, all of a sudden you could have the starting Chiefs backfield back for 2 weeks. And if you get them for 1%, then you don't have to next week, do like what we're talking about on some of these other guys. We don't know how long they're going to have the role. And you're like, well, crap, do I put 25, 30% of my fab on these guys? You can kind of preemptively do it. And yeah, with Booker, that's the guy that we talked about before the show. And the reason I added him is because last night we saw Josh Jacobs is one of those backs that has that style about him, right? It's just physical, Drake. It's physical. It's like James Conner, but more talented, obviously. It's like, Chris Carson. This guy just has high impact after high impact collision. And there's always multiple people trying to bring him down. He has a lot of people fall on him on the end of plays. Like Kamara, that's where he's so awesome, right? Like, he makes everybody miss, and he sees that the big hit's coming and just kind of goes down. He doesn't wait for 3 guys to be converging on him and one hits him and then the other 2 fall on him. Like, we forget, like 300-pound guys just falling on you. Every one of those things just doesn't help. And with Jacobs,
sounds like my Friday nights. Oh, did I say that? Son?
We saw, you said that live. We saw last night Jacobs get dinged up. Last year, he battled shoulder issues, and they had to shut him down. I think Booker's the cuff. Now, he won't get everything Jacobs is getting. Obviously, we would see Rashard more. But remember last year, Drake, when Jacobs went down, and all of a sudden, Washington came in, DeAndre Washington came in, and it was like he was getting like 67, 70% of the snaps when we could never get that for Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, he was getting passing down work.
Yeah, and Jacobs is getting more of that now. But Booker, I think, is the cuff, and you can get him for 1%. If you own Josh Jacobs and you want to avoid this whole thing, now, again, I know sometimes making a cut's hard. Booker's a guy to think about.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry as much about Jalen Richard, who I did start this week, and he scored me a touchdown. Dwayne and I on Sunday had this idea of, hey, we're going to use our YouTube page, and we're going to do these kind of live hits, just kind of reviewing games. So go to the YouTube page. That's why you should subscribe and check out. We did the Cowboys Falcons game, and we did the Jags Titans, and it was pretty cool. And from that, as you can now just see my pretty face here on the screen, from that it was the news broke about James White, his father passing away in a tragic accident. And we were kind of like, oh, wow, what do we do with this? And Dwayne's back now.
I don't know what happened. I was just gone. I was like, nah, let Drake fly solo.
I put the solo template up and everything. I'm like, all right, here we go. PFS going to be calling me tomorrow. Getting ready. So, yeah, I had to get rid of James White, the only guy on the wire, Jalen Richard. Boom, put him in. What do you know? He scores a touchdown.
The only other guy on backs, just before we move on, and we mentioned him kind of earlier, but it's Jeff Wilson. Mm-hmm. So maybe you're thinking, I don't really want to spend 25%, 45% on McKinnon. Maybe you're sitting pretty good, but you just want to add another back to your team, for, some depth and see what happens over the next couple of weeks, depending on these injuries. Jeff Wilson's a guy that you can get for a lot cheaper, and there's a really good chance that he's going to have Raheem Mostert's role this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
You can probably get him for 5 to 10%. So if you're just looking for a player that can do something for 2 to 3 weeks, I think once the other guys come back, he's done. Like, he's back to nowhere land, whereas McKinnon will continue to carry value and could have earned more value. But if you're looking at Wilson, he's kind of more like Mike Davis, right? But not as good. He's going to be the guy that's going to give you that Mostert 12 to 15 attempts. He could pop a long one. He's going to be the guy they use inside the 5 is my belief. And you can get him a lot cheaper.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a look at a couple of the comments and questions here in the chat room. We've got a couple of other running backs we're going to talk about: Fournette, Miles Sanders, James Connors. But, if you guys are listening and you're live with us, we want to make sure you get your questions heard. So can't get to all of them, but we'll try our best. Here's an interesting one. So Bernardino, I hope I pronounced that right. It was great show, guys. Would you drop Benny Snell, who he just added for $30 last week, or Cam Akers to pick up McKinnon, Lewis, whoever?
Honestly, it does depend on your roster, but I wouldn't play that game. I'm just going to hold on to the cuff I got. I still got a really good one. Now, if you need a player this weekend to start for you, well, then you got to make a decision, right? Mm-hmm. That's when you got to think, okay, do I go McKinnon? Do I go Davis? But otherwise, if I feel pretty good, like let's say I've got 2 backs that I'm comfortable with, and I've got another back on my bench that I don't mind putting in, if one of those guys go down, and I'm just looking for a 4th, 5th guy to have on my roster, I'm not going to go spend that money, on these guys just to drop Snell. And then next week, James Conner goes down again. And you're like, oh my God, like, what am I doing? Because what we know about Snell is, unlike some of these other guys, I think he'll basically be a bell cow back, if James Conner goes down. I think he'll lose some of the passing work that Conner is taking on, but I think he'll be the guy, that'll get 15 to 20 carries a game. So I wouldn't want to drop Snell. Who was the other guy that was Akers?
Yeah.
Cam Akers. Yeah. So Akers, it's going to be the same thing. What I could say on Akers is I'd like to know more about his injury, but we may not know by the time your waivers, run. If I was going to go pick up Henderson, I would do it, because basically your bet on Akers was a bet on the Rams backfield. And so now we've seen the other young guy from the year before flash. And so we don't want to be stubborn, right, and just be stuck on Akers. But it's going to be tough for me to drop Akers, to get McKinnon. It's going to be tough for me to drop Akers to get Mike Davis, unless Mike Davis, I need him, like you said, for the next 3 weeks to win. So again, you really have to be strategic about thinking about this and thinking, just like we talked about in the draft, thinking about multiple steps ahead. Okay, if I spend another 30% of my fab here, and XYZ happens in the next couple of weeks, because there's going to be more injuries. There's going to be. There's just no way around it. Now, hopefully we don't have many more weeks ever like this, right? But what I would say is Snell, no, I'm not doing it. You could talk me into Akers if I'm getting Henderson.
A lot of guys also asking, they have Malcolm Brown. Would you dump him for Henderson?
Man, that's a tough one. It's so tough, man, because Malcolm Brown looked decent. This scheme looks really good again. Yeah. And so it's one of those deals where I don't blame someone, Drake, if they do, but I don't have a strong stance on, hey, you have to go do it. What I would say is I do believe Darrell Henderson, as the more explosive player, carries the more upside. If that's what you care about, and you're like, man, just give me the most upside I can get. Yes, I would do it. I would drop him to get Henderson. But don't come back and kill us next week when Darrell Henderson lays a complete egg, and the next week Malcolm Brown's the starter again. That could happen. Akers could be back, and it could be, a committee again. To your point, he does have to play Buffalo this next week. It's not like that's going to be, a walk in the park. That's going to be the toughest game they've played so far. I mean, they haven't necessarily been challenged. They get to play freaking our 2 teams, Drake.
The NFC East is
terrible.
A abomination.
It's a joke. Yeah. So that's what I would say. If you want the upside, fine, do it, but if you spent 30, 40% of your fab on Malcolm Brown week 1, and now you're talking about spending 25, 30% on Henderson, then you got to stop and think about that. If what I would probably try to do in that case, Drake, is how can I hold Brown and drop someone else to get Henderson? I've got both of them, and I see what shakes out. I would do this same thing with Akers, right? If you've got Akers, is there a way that you could own Akers and Henderson?
If you guys are following us on Twitter, which you should be, you can follow the show at FF Hustle. I'm at Drake Fantasy. Dwayne is at Dwayne McFarland, DWAIN McFarland. Most of you are following Dwayne, but damn it, follow me in the show. We put out good stuff too. And if you follow Dwayne, one of his recent tweets was, the only back you need to own in New England is James White, because Cam Newton is the goal line back. But we're getting talk in the chat room about Damian Harris. He's going to be coming off IR, Dwayne. People want to know, Sony Michel's worthless. Burkhead, forget about it. Is there maybe a spot somewhere for Damian Harris to sneak in here and be productive? With Cam doing what's Cam doing, I say no.
Yeah, I think it's tough because here's why. I think the best that Harris can hope for is that he becomes a Burkhead type role. He could take Sony's role, but do you really want that? I mean, Sony Michel is not getting to play at all, So White's not going away as the passing down back. He's going to be the guy out there in the 2-minute drill. He's going to be the guy out there on 3rd, 4th, and long, and he's still going to he'll get a drive or two anyway. So what that means is you're hoping against hope that the Patriots go away from this 3-headed committee and that they just make it Harris and White. And even if that happens, you still have to deal with Cam Newton. So, and what's the chances that they really even do that anyway? Mm-hmm. They probably won't. They're probably going to keep 3 backs, just like they always do, plus Cam Newton. So for me, Damian Harris, whereas at the beginning of the season, we were really excited about him, I do think he could overtake Sony Michel. I totally think that. But I'm not sure what that's worth. I think he could even take a little bit away from Burkhead. But even then, I don't know what that's worth because Cam Newton is getting everything inside the 5, all of it. Mm-hmm. Basically, the Patriots have said, this is what we're doing. And for the most part, you can't stop us. Yes, they got stopped on that last play. But if you look at the majority of everything they did down there, Cam Newton was walking into the end zone. Mm-hmm. I mean, and if you wanted to stop him, you couldn't because he's huge. So now if Newton gets hurt,
that's when you add him. I was just going to say.
Yeah, that would change things.
Cam goes down, go to the waiver wire and add Harris.
But if Cam Newton gets hurt, let's be honest, this team may not win 2 more games the rest of the way. I mean, Jarrett Stidham, we saw all the reports, basically throwing 27 picks per training camp practice. I mean, the guy basically wilted. Now, who knows? Maybe he could turn things around, but that would be the only case where I would see Harris having value. Now, I'm fine with Harris as a speculative ad, right, in deeper leagues, because we could all be wrong. All of a sudden, Bill Belichick does crazy stuff. He could all of a sudden just say, Burkhead, boom, gone. Sony Michel, we're keeping you because we put a 1st-round pick on you, but head to the bench, and we're just going to roll with White and Harris. But again, even he's not getting rid of White. So even in that scenario, you still got to deal with – it's kind of like, how great do you feel about Devin Singletary and Zach Moss right now? That's about how you're going to feel about Damian Harris. It's the same thing, but worse. Because Josh Allen, at least there's a chance that you could get a carry inside the 5 as a running back. With the Patriots right now, there's not a chance.
That sound you hear, if you listen real carefully, turn up the volume in your car as you're driving to work. That's what you hear. That's the Ronald Jones truthers clicking their phone to get the Uber to get the hell out of town. It's Leonard Fournette season. It's over with. 12 carries, 103 yards, 2 touchdowns. It's Leonard time. I don't know what to say. I've been saying it from the rooftops, all season long. Brady went in after that loss last week, and he just went nuclear on this team. And he told Arians, he goes, listen, I want to get Fournette in the game. Rojo comes in, there's a fumble, this and that. It's over. They're not going back. It's Fournette season. If he's on your waiver wire, I know he's owned in like 80% of Yahoo leagues, but wish you could have traded for him on the cheap. Lord knows I tried. What do you think about Fournette? Does Jones have any value left?
Yeah, if Fournette is available, he goes ahead of everybody we've talked about. It's funny. I was actually looking at some waiver wire columns today from several people, and I was like, and they actually had Fournette listed, and they had him below like Jerick McKinnon and some of these other guys. I'm like, what the hell? Like Fournette, look, you say whatever you want about him, but he's a former early first round pick. You know, is he super fast? Does he, as far as he have great change of direction? No, but his top end speed is still not bad. He can be like a Derrick Henry, dude. Like when you put him in the right scheme, you let him get downhill and you let him run over people. And I think he can still be valuable in the league, and he's proven it. He's done it. Ronald Jones has never done it. So last week, 36% of the snaps to Ronald Jones, 19% to LaShawn McCoy, 45% to Leonard Fournette. Passing snaps, they pretty much split them. 34% to Jones, 37% to Fournette. McCoy was down to 29%, whereas he had been like 50% the week before. Rushing snaps, you had 57% for Leonard Fournette, and you had 39%, for Ronald Jones. Now, part of that was Leonard Fournette had 100%, of the inside the 5 work. And again, they're still using McCoy like on 3rd and long, 2-minute drill. That's still McCoy. So I think you're still going to see a bit of a committee, Drake. But I think to your point, I just think slowly Fournette's just going to take it over. I mean, you saw what he could do. Why even mess around with it anymore is my thought. Like, okay, great. You put him in. You said Rojo head to the bench, and what happened? Really, really good things. I know he was running against a tired defense and blah, 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 and all the excuses, but he still did it. Yeah, they put him on the field and they told him to run, and he did. So I'm not seeing that out of Rojo. Rojo's been playing against tired defenses too, and everybody wants to make excuses. But yes, Fournette is easily the back out of all of these that if he's there, I mean, I'd put over 50% on Fournette. And I'm willing to be wrong. But I'm like you. I think the cat's out of the bag at this point. It's just going to tilt and tilt and tilt until it's just pretty much Fournette.
Somebody you might have snagged in the first round who you couldn't play in week 1 was Miles Sanders of my beloved Eagles. He lost yet another offensive lineman this week as Isaac Seumalo went down, but he did rebound from not playing in week 1 to the tune of 20 rushing attempts, 95 yards rushing, a score, and 7 targets, which he turned into 3 catches for 36. Well, Sanders is back. Offense looks terrible. Wentz looks abysmal. If you want my game recap, go to the YouTube page. I break down the Eagles for 10 minutes, and 1,500 other Eagles fans have now commiserated with me on that video. But, this offense looks broken, Dwayne, but Sanders looks like he's at least going to return the value that you invested in him.
It doesn't matter, though, because he's always on the field and he's going to catch balls. I mean, he played 77% of the snaps. When the score was within 3, he played 100% of the snaps. Passing snap percentage, 73%. Rushing snap percentage, 85%. Inside the 5 snap percentage, 100%. On 3rd and 4th and long down and distance, that's the one place Boston Scott spelled him. Gave him 33%, but Miles was 67%. 2-minute offense, Miles Sanders, 88% to 13%. Basically, it doesn't get any better than that. That's essentially, that's a bell cow back, and it doesn't even matter to me what offense he's in. We know that Sanders still has flash. And look, the Eagles aren't going to be this bad all year. They're going to get better. They started off the year with they started off with everyone hurt. Well, I mean, look, Peterson does this. He somehow finds a way to tape it together and put a little stretch run together. I think Miles Sanders is going to be okay. As they just get healthier. Obviously, a couple of the linemen, they're not returning. They're done for the year. But overall, man, I feel great, about Miles Sanders. Just this, if you drafted him, this is what you wanted. You were hoping this is what he, could be. Now, you wanted the Eagles to be fully loaded with offensive linemen and be a great offense, because then Miles Sanders had the upside to be like a McCaffrey, right? He doesn't have that upside anymore. But if you took him at the end of the 1st, or you got him in the 2nd round in drafts because people were scared, man, I don't know what else. Basically, this is going as good as it could go.
If you listen to our hustle draft plan, there was one name that came up over and over and over again, and it was James Conner. After week 1, everybody said Conner was dead. Throw all your fab money at Benny Snell. Well, guess what? That was foolish, because James Conner wasn't injured and out for the year. It wasn't like CMC, who's out for 4 to 6 weeks, or Barkley, who we know is done. But literally, he was just out for the game, and he came right back, 16 rushes for 106 yards and a touchdown. Yikes to everybody who spent a ton on Benny Snell.
Yeah, and you know what though? I don't blame people that spent money on Snell. I mean,
Mhm.
Connor's hurt all the time.
And he will get hurt again.
And so if you picked up Snell and you spent all that money on him, that's why I was saying earlier, don't drop him. Like Benny
Right.
Snell, look, we love Connor. We made him part of our draft plan, but we also said, look, there's risk with him, but that's why you can get him in the third round. And some people sent us, pictures of their draft getting him in the fourth round, which was awesome.
Yeah.
So it was even more baked in. The problem with Connor for us last week is I don't even think he was hurt. I think something happened between him and the coaches. Something happened. Like if you look at him, because I went back and watched that game late last week again. And, he's jumping up and down. He's yelling at the coaches on the side, and it looks like it's about the play calling. You can't tell for sure what he's saying. And all of a sudden, he's out. And nobody knows what play he got hurt on. Nobody can find it. All the doctors are like, well, I think it's this one. I think it's this one. We don't know. I don't think he was even hurt. I think they basically I think what happened is they basically said, dude, stop freaking out. We're not doing that. And they taught him a lesson. And it was like great for them because Snell came in and did what he did. And they were like, look, we got this guy. So like fix your shit or we'll just go with him. And I think basically he changed. Now I can't prove any of this, but remember the Steelers are the team that when AB was a complete nutcase for multiple years and we didn't know, they keep things in-house. They do not share things. They're a very tight group. So if this did happen, we would never know. And Tomlin wouldn't tell us. So to me, that's what happened. He was never even hurt.
So it may have been a gamble to bet on James Conner. Terrible segue, cheap plug. But if you want to come and prop up on Thrive Fantasy with the hustle, do so this weekend. Thrive Fantasy is daily fantasy sports app for player props. Thrive has awarded over $1.5 million in prizes since launching in 2018 and has $50,000 in guaranteed weekly prizes. Use promo code HUSTLE. Again, promo code HUSTLE, name of the show, wink, wink, when you sign up today, and you'll receive an instant $20 bonus on your first deposit of $20 or more. Download Thrive Fantasy on the App Store or Google Play Store or by visiting their website, thrivefantasy.com. That's THRIVE fantasy.com. Sign up and prop up today. Again, promo code HUSTLE. And we'd love you to do that because getting low on the beers here and need the money to go buy another six-pack. And if you guys are drinking a beer out there while you watch the show, we'd love to hear you put it in the YouTube comments. Let us know what you're boozing on. And if you're drinking too hard, you must have missed Russell Gage last week because somehow he's still only owned in 23% of Yahoo leagues, Dwayne. And he should have had like a 70-yard touchdown pass this week. How are people still sleeping on this guy?
Well, I think it's just because there's going to be an odd man out at some point, right? And so I think some people think Julio is probably not fully healthy. He's saying he's still not able to fully open up and just cut loose, which is why he couldn't get under the pass from Russell Gage, which you're talking about, which would have been a touchdown. So I think that's, part of it. Now, what I'll say, is if you look at the Falcons and you look at, really what they do, and you think about, 11 personnel. I mean, right now, so far this season, they have ran 11 personnel on 68% of their plays. So he's out there a lot, even if, there's a situation where he's going to be less involved. I think the other problem is so let's say there's going to be a week where Julio, Calvin Ridley is going nuts. People, now the Cowboys can't really cover anyone. Like I've never seen somebody so wide open, but he was making them look silly. We've known Calvin Ridley's a good route runner. We've known he's a good separator. And to me, he's just taking his game to another level. Like Calvin Ridley right now is, if you look back at the drafts, the guy that we were targeting in the fourth round was AJ Brown and Calvin Ridley. Like easily now we'd be like Calvin Ridley. I mean, the guy, now things are going to swing and things are going to happen. We still like AJ Brown. He's got to get healthy. But man, the guy looks great. So my worry with Gage is you don't want to spend too much because you can't feed four guys every week. When there's four guys, there's an odd man out each week. And it also caps, everyone else. So I think that's what people are thinking. But to your point, Drake, he shouldn't be on a wire. He's a guy that you can definitely use. Now, I mean, having said all that, don't be mad when you put him into the lineup and that's the week he gives you 3 catches. Now, the thing he's doing is that dude's living on trash time. So if the Falcons ever get competitive and actually are, ahead like they were this past week, that does hurt, Russell Gage. Most of his stuff is, I don't want to say most, but a good percentage of his stuff is coming in garbage time.
I like the new feature on the Yahoo Fantasy app where it alerts you when players in your league get added or dropped. And just as we were coming on the air to do the show, I got an alert that a buddy of mine, Mark Holzauer, give him a shout out, had dropped Paris Campbell, one of our favorite receivers in the preseason. And he is out indefinitely after injuring his PCL in the Colts Week 2 win over the Vikings. So he's out.
But it's
the opportunity door opens.
Yeah, it's not just PCL either, though. It's
MCL
MCL and PCL. So that's the problem. Like how you rehab, from that type of injury is a lot tougher than just having one or the other. So he could still have surgery. What I read today, I know the one source I looked at was Gene Bramall from Football Guys.
Dr. Gene, shout out.
Yeah. And what he talked about, and I don't want to misquote Dr. Gene, so you guys just go read it for yourself. But basically, it's normal for an athlete that has those two injuries at the same time to still need a surgery. And so it comes down to, really, how they feel about the mobility and all those things. Again, now I'm getting into stuff, doctor stuff that I'm not a doctor. So you guys can go read that. I'm sure you can read what Dr. Chow has. But basically, Paris Campbell, if you're in, 8, 10 player leagues, even 12 player leagues where you don't have deep benches, you just got to let him go. Look, I play in super deep leagues where you start multiple flexes and you get to, leave 10 guys, on your bench. I'm cutting him. Yeah. I mean, I'm moving on. I think, and I hate it. But even if he comes back, I don't think you can get anything. Let's say the best case scenario works out for him. When you hear indefinitely, that's never good. That means it's not in 2 weeks. It's probably not in 4 weeks. Like the best case is like maybe 6 weeks from now. Everything goes well for Paris Campbell, but then he has to work his way back into the offense. He's got to work his snap count back up. Well, fantasy season's over.
Yeah, don't climb.
It's over. Yeah, don't. And look, we love him, and I hated it. It sucked because it looked like we were going to be right, and so many people were going to hit on it. Like the guy has juice. I mean, and Rivers was going to him, and I wanted it to happen because I wanted it. So many people's like, oh, well, this guy doesn't check every box on like my checklist box, about how much target share they had in college and all these things, which I love that kind of stuff. But there's always exceptions to those rules. And I mean, Paris Campbell, if a lot of them come from Ohio State. So, I mean, if you have an athlete like that and you get him in the right place, they can still do things. And so I was super excited about him. But it is what it is. You got to move on. And so you said opportunity opens.
Yeah. Opportunity. Is that opening for a guy we saw produce because everybody was hurt last year, Zach Pascal, who had 3 receptions on 4 targets, or the rookie Michael Pittman, who also, I believe, had 3 catches? Which way you going here if you got to just stick with the Colts?
Yeah, so what is interesting, about this deal, Drake, is this last week, T.Y. Hilton only played 58% of the snaps. So, and I couldn't find anything on him. So if somebody knows in the chat room and they can tell us, like I looked everywhere. There was nothing about him being hurt. All I can think of is they got up, right, on the Vikings, whose offense looks miserable. Hey, you have a playmaker. His name's Irv Smith. Just saying. You could get him involved and, loosen things up a little bit. Gary Kubiak, like, get your shit together, man. If you look at, those snaps, 92% to Pittman and 93% to Pascal. And it was only 58% to Hilton. But then here's where it gets more telling, right? When you look at the routes, Hilton still ran 90% of the routes. So what it tells me is they got ahead, and those 2 guys blocked better than Hilton. They were just like, we're just going to run, and we don't want to get Hilton hurt. Mm-hmm. So I think Hilton obviously is still the number 1, but it could cap a little bit like of his upside, right? Like in DFS, like if they're not in a shootout, like they may just pull Hilton off the field, for these 2 guys to block. So I think those are the primary 3, 17% of the targets to Pittman, 13% to Pascal, and 17% to Hilton. I don't know how much you can trust the other 2 guys' targets, Drake, just because, A lot of them, some of them, not all of them, but some of those came, with them not really having Hilton, on the field. I shouldn't say many because, he ran almost as many routes as those guys did. But I like them. I just don't love them because they don't have the juice, right, that Campbell had. And so I think this is an offense where I'm fine. You want to put – if I was picking one, it would be Pittman. And I think he's a 10 to 15%, guy. But where he operates is not somewhere typically at this point in Phillip Rivers' career, he has loved really using, because he's not a deep threat like Mike Williams. He's more of an intermediate possession guy. And that's kind of what Rivers has gone away from. He likes the short, quick, underneath timing route type of stuff. Now it could change, Pittman may, win him over, but he would be the guy, that I would add. And then Pascal in super deep leagues, fine. You can put a few dollars on him if you absolutely are just stuck.
Now, we're unsure if Davante Adams is going to play. He's got a hamstring injury. I've seen reports where they say it's minor and they're not worried about it. And I've seen other ones where they say, oh, maybe he's week to week. We'll see what happens. But either way, if you own Davante Adams, you need to have a backup plan for this weekend. On his own team, a player we loved last year was Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Is it worth spending a couple of bucks to pick MVS up, Dwayne?
Well, I don't think you can get MVS for a couple of bucks, at this point. It's probably going to go more than that. But yes, if I own Davante Adams, absolutely. MVS had 18% of the targets last week, which led the team, 13% to Allen Lazard. He ran a route on 74% of dropbacks, 82% for Lazard. So basically, if Adams is out, he's going to be on the field all the time. And honestly, I just think he's the more explosive player out of him and Lazard. So yes, I would be happy to carry MVS. MVS is, even if you don't own Adams, MVS is showing we were probably a year early on him last year, which is so easy to happen, right, in fantasy. But he's a guy that honestly I took in my last round of a ton of drafts this year, but I had to cut him like in week, right away because of some injuries and stuff like that. And I wish I could have kept him, but I couldn't because he's showing, he's showing some things. So he had 7 targets last week.
The hits keep on coming, and they came in Denver, where Cortland Sutton is now lost for the year. They have Jerry Jeudy. They have KJ Hamler, a couple of rookies they brought in. Drew Lock is going to be down for a few weeks, so this could really all just point up for Noah Fant. But someone's going to have to catch the ball there on the outside. If Judy's available, obviously I think he's a priority play. What do you do with anybody here in the Mile High City?
It's Jeudy, Fant, or bust, in my opinion. The other thing we're dealing with is we've got Lock's going to be out. He was actually looking okay. So Lock's out for several weeks now. We've got Driscoll, who, dude, I had that game on for whatever reason. I was flipping through and I had it on that one. And I literally watched him miss a wide open read, literally a guy running with nobody covering him. And I think he looked at him, but he still didn't throw it. Then 2 plays later, I watched him literally stare down a blitz and just get obliterated. Like, this guy's processor is broken. Like, it doesn't work. So I'm really worried about Driscoll. Basically what I would say is start whatever defense is playing Denver because Driscoll looks terrible. Now, Jeudy, I know he's had some drops, but man, the guy looks good, Drake. If you look at the way he's operating, 71% of his targets last week, he was open on, which is really good. Like a typical wide. Now there can be variance, right, when you're looking week to week. Let me come up here and look at him, for the season. So for the season, open on 75% of his targets. The average for a wide receiver in the NFL being open on his actual targets is actually 42%. So Jerry Jeudy is only like 30% above that. Now, part of that is they're scheming him up, and they're using him kind of similar to the way Chris Godwin got used last year. He's not always lining up inside, but he motions, he does different things, and he ends up being the guy running the routes inside. So if you look at it from a standpoint of linebackers and safeties, 56% of his targets, 9 of them, have come with a linebacker or safety in primary coverage. So, man, it really sucks on the Lock thing because I think Jerry Jeudy, based on everything else we're seeing at receivers, had a chance to challenge, CeeDee Lamb for who was going to be the best rookie receiver this year.
Tampa Bay is playing at Denver. If the
Oh my
Bucks are
God,
under
they're gonna destroy Denver. Like, you'll probably win your game this weekend just off the Bucks defense. I'm not joking.
Somebody in our chat room just asked, because we were talking about MVS, what you think the pace is going to be in this Packers Saints Sunday night game. And that leads me to Tre'Quan Smith, who's filling in for Michael Thomas. And he amassed 7 targets last night, which he turned into 86 yards. So if he's on your waiver wire, hey, Drew Brees doesn't look great, but still, he's got to give the ball to somebody besides Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, and here's what I'm going to say about Drew Brees. His arm looks the same as it's looked for like 3 years. Like, so I don't get it. People are like, oh my God, Drew Brees, his arm's shot. Well, no shit. It's been gone for years. What I saw last night that was like concerning was his accuracy. Like, how often do you see Drew Brees miss wide open players? Like, I saw 2 passes where the player was literally had nobody within 3 steps, right, of them, and Brees totally missed the pass. And then his normal pinpoint accuracy was like off somebody's hip, somebody having to reach back to catch a pass. And so to me, it's an accuracy thing. And some of that could go to timing. These guys are creatures of habit, Drake, and things have been changed, for Drew Brees this year. But I anticipate that Drew Brees is going to end up being fine. I get it. You want to drop him and you want to start Gardner Minshew or whatever. I mean, you can go ahead. And Minshew's looked really good, but I think Drew Brees will end up being fine. And the only reason why, Drake, is because this isn't anything new. It's not new. It's the same thing we've already known. Now, if this was all of a sudden like last year he's throwing freaking bullets and now he's a Red Ryder BB gun, yeah, then we would be like, holy crap, what happened to this guy? But that hasn't happened, So I'm okay with Brees. But as far as, the pace, question, New Orleans, the first 2 weeks, 68 and 60 plays. Green Bay has been a little bit, higher than where they were last year, where they had 78 and 73 plays, but it wasn't necessarily their pace. It's the time of possession, for the Packers. They've basically been blowing teams out. Because like if you look at, the percentage of their plays in the 2-minute drill, 5% total so far, for the year. No huddle, only 6%. So I think you're going to see in a closer game, you won't see the Packers get near as many plays. And who are we asking? Tre'Quan Smith.
Yeah, Smith. And then you could also kind of crowbar in there. What the hell happened to Emmanuel Sanders? Guy has 4 catches on the year. We thought he was going to be this like great slot machine sort of for Drew Brees and kind of take away from Jared Cook. He's nowhere to be found.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, you're integrating a new receiver with a quarterback. We know the number one thing for receivers and quarterbacks is timing, especially for someone like Drew Brees, who trusts you to be in a certain spot. He's going to put the ball there because he doesn't have the arm strength. He's going to put the ball there before you're there, like way before, because it still has to travel really slowly to get there. So with a guy like Sanders, I think it's a trust thing. So if you need to drop him and you need to move on, I mean, we were never super high on him, but people that I really listen to, like Matt Waldman and some other high stakes players that I play with, I saw them drafting Emmanuel Sanders a lot. So I know there's obviously something there. He's a guy that you can let go for now, but just be ready. Just be watching. Hopefully it just isn't an explosion. Maybe you just kind of see it slowly start to warm up, and we need to keep an eye on him for people on the show, because he's going to get dumped a lot, and we can just kind of keep an eye. Now, what I'll say is, he ran around on 87% of the dropbacks. 90% was Tre'Quan Smith, who was number 1 on the team. So Jared Cook, again, 69%, it is what it is, with Jared Cook. They rotate and they do different things. So it's he never gets, all of that work. Then if you look at Tre'Quan, Tre'Quan Smith, Mike Thomas wasn't the problem last night. It was Drew Brees had a really bad game. Like Tre'Quan Smith, Drake, like I was surprised. Like I thought he played Mike Thomas's role really well. Like, was he Mike Thomas? No, but like, did I really think, oh my God, what are they doing? I mean, the guy had 7 targets. He was 18% of the targets, ran around on 90% of dropbacks. He was open on 57%, of his targets. He got plenty of matchups against the linebackers, safeties, just like Thomas. So, I mean, he was the first read on 100% of his targets. So, I mean, he was a part of the offense.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we don't know how long it's going to last because Mike Thomas is, trying to say that he's going to come back, but we don't know because it's a high ankle sprain. So he kind of falls in the bucket, right, of some of those running backs that we talked about earlier. You might get a couple of weeks out of him, but leagues where I picked him up for a couple of dollars last week and I lose Paris Campbell this week, things like that, he's going in. I'm putting him in.
He's only rostered in 15% of Yahoo leagues, so it should be out there across the universe for you. Man, Dwayne, I don't get how the Steelers are so consistently good at drafting wide receivers. My first comment on the Steelers is I think Deontay Johnson is their new Antonio Brown. And secondly, boy, Chase Claypool looks like he's pushing James Washington out of the way and getting some snaps on the outside, even though he's only had 43 snaps in 2 games. But I stole this from your PFF brethren, Nathan Janke. Leads the NFL in fantasy points per snap at wide receiver at 0.57. Pretty impressive. So Chase Claypool, maybe in a deeper league, somebody take a shot on?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a deeper league, it's fine. Just so, what he needs to do is basically overtake James Washington. Deontay Johnson is so good that George Shahiri from PFF, I've been working with him on this data feed. So it's awesome. I'm so excited because I would go pull all this data from all these places within PFF. And so now they've built this feed for me, Drake, where boom, I just get this one thing. I can see everything. And basically I can analyze it and it populates everything I need. So shout out to PFF George.
It's like a porn hub for fantasy stats.
It's amazing. And so now I don't have to spend all the time pulling all this and I can spend more time analyzing. So I'm so stoked, and it's data it's amazing. But the thing that needs to happen for Claypool, he needs to overtake James Washington and be the full third receiver, right? Right now they're splitting that role. So if you looked at, week 1, it was 69% of the routes ran for Washington, Claypool 19%.
Right.
Then this last week, it was 31% of the routes to Claypool, 52% to James Washington. And after what we saw last week, I wouldn't be surprised if we maybe move to, more of a dead even kind of a thing, or maybe Claypool passes in this week. I don't know, right? I mean, I'm not sure how you can keep him off the field if he keeps making a big play or two, every week. But it's
exactly what we saw last year with Deontay Johnson. It's the same trajectory.
So again, now he's probably going to still be third in the pecking order, but in big play leagues or super deep leagues where you play multiple flexes, I mean, Claypool could be a guy that could work his way in. And again, injuries happen. If all of a sudden Deontay Johnson or Juju Smith-Schuster, if somebody like that gets hurt, I mean, wow, then Claypool's automatically on the map. And if he somehow passes James Washington in the pecking order, he's as high as the number 2 all of a sudden, because all that talk, about, Eric Ebron and everything that was going to happen there, Drake. I mean, there's just not, a lot shaken. I mean, he's getting a little bit. He got 12% of the targets last week, ran around on 74% of the dropbacks, which isn't terrible. But for a guy like him, you want it to be up in like the 80, 90%, kind of range, given how much they spread the ball around to give him a chance, to score points. And he's not getting that. But yeah, dude, Johnson, 26% of the targets week 1, 28% of the targets last week, 94% of the routes last week, 93% of the routes the week before. Juju's still the guy getting 100% of the routes. He never leaves the field. So I think you're going to see the weeks where it swings back to Juju, but it's clear that they're the 1 and 2. And I agree. If you own Deontay Johnson, you feel wonderful about it. He's going to be a wide receiver too.
What a great game, Dwayne, that we watched on Sunday night between Seattle and New England. And we were talking, after week 1 about the slow pace that the Patriots play. And that kind of went out the window. Cam opened it up, showed off that arm, and he threw for nearly 400 yards. It can't all go to Julian Edelman. And N'Keal Harry and Damiere Byrd were getting in on the action. Harry, 8 of 12 for 72 yards. Looking okay out there. They get Vegas this week. Then they're going to play at the Chiefs. I'm sure that'll be a shootout before they get Denver in a bye. So, in the back half of your bench, you need a wide receiver 3 or maybe a bye week fill-in guy down the road. Harry's looking okay.
Yeah. I think Damiere Byrd's in play for like DFS tournament super long shot darts, which you don't always have to do this early in the league, this early in the year. Just depends on how much salaries adjust. There's still typically a little bit of room left, and then by week 4, it's like super tight. But he's a guy to keep in mind when that gets here. But yeah, for Harry, I mean, 94% of the routes, 85% of the snaps, 25% of the targets last week. He's getting to operate in the inside against the backers, the safeties. They're trying to get the ball to him a lot through scheme, getting the ball to him on like little, quick throws, tunnels. That kind of wasn't exactly a tunnel, but like these screen, type throws. My only concern with him, Drake, is like, God, he looks slow. It's just like his feet are so heavy and he can't break a tackle. It's like, and Collinsworth called it out like a couple times, like, N'Keal Harry, man, if he breaks that one tackle, that's it. Like, he's got like 20 yards in front of him. And man, the guy gets just tackled by anybody breathing on him. And like,
he's
how
the Zach
big he
Ertz
is,
of wide receivers.
It's crazy. It's crazy. So, but 12 targets, I think what you'll have to look at with the Patriots, Drake, is in the weeks where they don't have to throw a lot, they're not gonna. In the weeks where they need to, they showed you a gear. And, Cam hung in there. I mean, Russell Wilson's a Jedi. And Cam hung in there, played really well.
Won the game.
And by the way, everybody, who was our number one take last? Who was my number one take last quarterback, Drake? Hey, just wait and take this guy, Cam Newton. Like, man, I can't be more elated, like how many teams I own him on. He's dropping 30 and 40 points. Like, it's just like, and people that drafted – Josh Allen earlier, which I own Josh Allen plenty too. Basically, the draft plan is if he's there in the 9th or 10th, take him. But if you look at a lot of these guys that even went earlier, like even Russ, right? And hey, Dak, a guy that I liked in the 7th, man, I'm sitting there and this is a guy that you get in the 13th, 14th, 15th round in the type of drafts I'm in. And to be able to go blow for blow with these people that spent those early picks on their quarterback, he's essentially this year's Lamar Jackson. That's what he is. He's this year's Lamar Jackson. I mean, let's just say it.
Yeah. All right. Before we get to tight end, because I see an inordinate amount of Mo Alley Cox questions coming in. People have some wide receiver questions for you. Let's see. I'll go to the first one here. Friend of the show and fellow podcast host, if you're into pro wrestling, the Worked Shoot podcast is one to check out. My friend Corey Richmond. Dwayne, Parker, Landry, or Tate at flex this week? We'll assume it's PPR.
Devontae Parker, Jarvis Landry, or Golden Tate.
Hang
on. Let me look at the schedule. So we got Cleveland against Washington. That sounds good. Then we've got the Giants against the 49ers. Doesn't sound so bad, anymore. And who's my last one, Drake?
Devontae Parker.
Parker's got Jacksonville. Like, none of these really. Now, Herndon has been pretty good, and he'll probably follow Parker. Let's keep an eye on the practice report. If Parker gets back to a full practice again by Thursday, I'm going to go with Parker. If not, I'm going to go with Jarvis Landry.
Okay, let me look around. Some more questions here. We appreciate it. If you're over on YouTube, again, please subscribe. Leave us some comments there. Let us know which wide receivers you're looking to pick up this week. Let's see. Now we hit all the receiver questions. So I guess we can answer the question of all questions here. Are we picking up Mo Alley Cox from the Colts, who went 5 for 111 in Jack Doyle's absence?
Man, it's funny, right? It's another one of these situations where we have no clue what's going to happen really when Doyle comes back. I think, if I remember right, Trey Burton is eligible next week, not this week, but the week after, to return. He was on the 3-week IR. But I have to say this, this guy looked better than any of those guys. I mean, this guy is like, did you watch him, Drake? Like, this guy has a lot to try to bring down. Like, his run after the catch really impressed me for such a big guy. Even with those other guys out, he only ran a route on 63% of the dropbacks, so they were subbing him out. He only played on 67% of the snaps. They do run a lot of 12 personnel, with the Colts. So you had some guy, Noah Togiai. I don't even know how you say this guy's name. Togiai, Togai maybe. Anyway, 51% of the snaps to that guy. He ran a route on 30%. So, I mean, they're always getting 2 tight ends involved. So he could take over Burton's second role easily. The question is, can he take over Jack Doyle's number 1 role? Mm-hmm. And what I would say is he's worth more than Jack Doyle in that role for fantasy. I mean,
and
Jack Doyle
Paris Campbell now.
Yeah, Jack Doyle ain't doing what this dude did, like with the ball after the catch. Like if I'm the Colts, and again, we don't know everything that goes on inside practice. We don't see all their reps. We don't know how well the guy knows the playbook, all this stuff. All we see is a guy that we're like, holy shit, how do you get this guy on the field more? We don't know if he's smart. We don't know if he knows how to play the game. We don't know if the quarterbacks trust him to be where they need him to be. Like, we have no clue on all that. All we see is, wow, they gave him a chance and he blew up. So what you're hoping is that he continues to get that chance. And I think there is a chance of that, Drake. I think it's not like Jack Doyle is like a picture of health, and it's not like he's just, oh my God, got to have Jack Doyle on the field. Basically, he's been a fill-in. He's a nice player. But if they determine, some guys, Drake, here's what I'll say, don't practice well, but you put him in a game, this, your guy, Nick Foles, like, he's terrible in practice. He can never win a job. And then all of a sudden somebody gets hurt and he gets no practice. You're like, hey, Foles, go in. He's like, boom, light him up. This guy could be like that. Maybe he's just really good in games and he can't practice. We don't know. I mean, everybody's different. So, yes, I'm putting money on Mo Alley-Cox. Obviously, I play in tight end premium leagues where you could start up to 3 of them. I'm going to be in that kind of format. I'm willing to go 20-25%, on him. In a typical league, I would say, you're going to say the 5-10% range.
Dwayne and I were texting on Sunday morning about our DFS lineups, and the one name that I kept bringing up over and over again that I was anchoring in my lineups was Jordan Reed of the 49ers. I think he was like 2,600 or some crazy low number, and he's only 7% owned in fantasy. He was on a snap count, and they said he may remain on a snap count. But he came in place of Kittle, and he got 2 scores for the 49ers, who are desperate for options with everybody banged up out there. Knowing he's on a pitch count, would you still pick him up and slide him in your lineup this week if you're desperate at tight end?
Yeah, if Kittle's going to be out, I just wouldn't put a lot of money on him. He only was on the field for 46% of snaps, 63% of routes. You really want to see that up around 70 or 80. But again, 25% of the targets. So when he was in there, and this happens sometimes, right? Utilization is not like this perfect art. You see it with Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones only gets like 48% of the snaps. He's only in there for, you'd be surprised at how little he's in there in the passing game. He doesn't get the 2-minute drill. He doesn't get any of that. But when he is on the field, they scheme it around him. And so that's what you were seeing with Jordan Reed, is like, he wasn't out on the field as much as we want to see, but when he was out there, he was pretty much the primary read every time. And so that's what I liked about Reed, and why I would be fine if I really needed somebody to put in. You say you don't put him in as your backup, some of these other guys that you think may have more of a value over the rest of the season.
Our guy, Mike Gesicki, went off this weekend just as I dropped him in a league. I'm kind of playing, like so many of us out there, this tight end carousel with Herndon and Gesicki and the flavor of the week. And now Gesicki goes off. If he's on your waiver wire, do you prioritize him over Cox, Reed, and even Dalton Schultz, who we'll get to?
Oh, yeah. Over all those guys. And because Gesicki, look, I mean, we know he's got, the talent. I mean, he still only had, this past week, he had, 19%, of the targets, but they happened to run a gazillion plays because they had to try to, bring tempo to try to catch back up. That game stayed close. It was closer than what people thought until the end. But Gesicki was only on a route for 59% of dropbacks. So there's still that. He's not running routes as much as you would want a tight end to run routes. You'd want him to be in the 75-80%, range. Now, it's not because he's pass blocking either. Only 3% of the time when he's out there for a pass play is he actually being asked to pass block. So that's not the issue. It's just he rotates. He only played 55% of the snaps. Now, what I'll say, though, is he looked really good, made some really good plays. Here's the thing with Gesicki, though, is if you look at who he played, they played the Bills. And so Tremaine Edmonds, their first-round pick from 2 years ago, was out. And then Milano, their second linebacker, was also out. So they were down their top two linebackers. So basically Gesicki was out there against the backups. They tried to get Micah Hyde on him some, who's still, a solid player. They played three safeties for a lot of the game, to try to help offset some of that. But I think they missed, having, the linebackers. So I would still put Gesicki over the rest of those guys because he is, I think, he's got the talent. You want to get, more from a snaps percentage, standpoint out of him. So what I would say is you don't go nuts over Gesicki over these other guys. I would definitely still put him at the top, though.
Gesicki's schedule coming up, too. He gets Jacksonville this week, then Seattle, a banged-up Niners team, Denver, blah, 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 blah. Then he gets this nice stretch with Chargers, Rams, Cardinals, Jets, which is not too bad of a stretch for a tight end. So, okay, I got to talk about your boy here. Dalton Schultz for the Cowboys turned in a 9 for 88 and a touchdown performance on 10 targets against the Falcons. We were going back and forth talking to each other, and I said when it was 50-0 or whatever it was, I go, the Falcons are going to lose this game. And Dalton Schultz was a big factor in the Cowboys coming back to win. Is he for real, or was this game script? I mean, there's three really good receivers plus Zeke Elliott on this offense to feed.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you saw is Dak was taking what they were giving him. And so once the Falcons got up in the game, they just didn't want to give up a big play to the receivers. They basically said, run Zeke or throw to Dalton Schultz. Like, if you go back and watch the game, that's literally what they said. They literally may have said it to him, like from across the line before the snap, throw it to Schultz or hand it to Zeke. Not joking. Like, it was that obvious. They were trying to do everything. Now, their defense also has major problems. How does Dan Quinn have a job? Isn't defense like his thing? And he just continues to have these meltdowns. Anyway.
When you have all that talent in Seattle, me and you could go out there and coach the team.
Yeah. So, I mean, for Schultz, I think he's kind of like Jarwin. Jarwin was a guy that we weren't super excited about just because there's so many mouths to feed. Do I think Dalton Schultz is going to get ahead in the pecking order over Amari Cooper? No. Over CeeDee Lamb? No. Over Michael Gallup? Probably not. But that would be the guy I could see it for. I mean, Gallup's not getting the work, man. Like, he's out there, but they're not throwing this dude the ball. Again, the other guys all have the matchups, and Gallup doesn't. And so this is the problem we talked about with Gallup. He only had 5 targets this week. Everybody's like, "Oh, Gallup's going to be awesome. Pick him in wide. Take him in. He's a wide receiver 2." He's just, look. I like Gallup, but I've watched every snap this guy's ever played. He's a solid player. He's not an elite player, and I'm not saying that Gallup won't end up having some good weeks this year. I still think that he will, and he'll probably still end up with like 16, 17% of the targets. But they are not prioritizing Michael Gallup right now.
If you look,
for Schultz, sorry, yes. He's fine. Don't go nuts on it, though. I think it was being down by so much. The other team basically said, we want you to throw it to your 2 worst passing options. And that's what they invited them to do.
If you go to the Washington offense, they barely have 2 passing options. And one of them is Logan Thomas, friend of the show. Evan Silva is a big fan. If you listen to any of his work, they've kind of dubbed him LT3. Kind of a disappointing week 2 performance. 4 catches for 26 yards, but he's still got 9 targets. If you picked him up after week 1 and you plugged him in and he kind of disappointed, are you holding on to him or are you dumping him for one of these other guys we already talked about?
I'm not. I actually think, he's shown 2 weeks in a row that it's him and McLaurin. The offense isn't great, but they're the 2 centerpieces of the offense. I mean, 21% of the targets to each of them. They both had 9, this past week. So listen to this. So this guy, Drake.
This guy
runs a route he's a tight end, 95% of the dropbacks. That is like nuts. Basically, he must be a terrible blocker because they never ask him to do it ever. They're like, just go run a route, bro. And the dude does. And he's, this is a guy that was a quarterback, in college, It's taken him time. We talked about him in pre-draft as being a last round flyer in super deep leagues. And he just needed time, to develop. And it looks like it's finally happening. I mean, he's kind of a late bloomer, like what we saw with the guy last night, Darren Waller.
Your boy.
This guy's an athlete. And he seems to have everything clicking now. And so, I'm not going away from him for some of these other guys. 2 weeks in a row with, being one of the top 2 targets on the team. So I'm sticking with him.
Scott Fishbowl, who's your tight end?
My tight end?
Yeah.
Logan Thomas.
Oh, okay.
Actually, no, it isn't. That's a different league. It's Jordan Akins right now because Gronk sucks.
I got a lot of guys asking in the chat room here about Jordan Akins in this offense. Is he worth, in a 58-team tight end premium league, is Jordan Akins someone worthy of throwing in there to stream?
Yes, Jordan Akins is the reason you don't have to spend a ton on any of the tight ends this week. You don't have to go spend 30, 40% on any of these guys. Obviously, if you're in some of the, tight end premium, multi-flex leagues, not all of them are there, right? A lot of the guys we talked about they've already been picked up. So there may only be 1 or 2 of these guys. And so you have to do more. But in a typical league, you can get any one of these guys. So you just don't say Gesicki belongs at the top. But the most I would put on Gesicki is probably still 7 to 10%, because I can get Akins for probably 2% in that kind of league, and I'm okay with it. So, if you look at, what he's done, and it wasn't just, this past week, the week before, and I think we talked about it, Drake, but ran a route in week 1 on 80% of dropbacks, which is really good for a tight end. It's not Logan Thomas good, but it's really good. 83% this last week. He had 15% of the targets this week, which was up, from the week before, where he was actually only 5%, of the targets. But here's the thing. This is an offense that used to be Akins and Fells. They basically rotated all the time. Now Akins is getting to lead the way. The only thing I could see happening, Drake, they've played 2 really good teams and they've gotten down early. So what I could see is, whenever they're in a game that's closer, or maybe Houston leads, we could see more Fells. Now, again, this is a guy you're getting for 2 or 3%, 1%, maybe for free on your waiver wire. So I still like him in that case. Like I said, he's on the field plenty, and man, he looks athletic. Another guy that I've watched, several times now, several of his plays. And I've seen him make 2 really good moves to make somebody miss, and he seems to have some juice.
Looks like a young Brian Drake out there.
Hey, a guy we should mention, I didn't even think about it, but I did see, even in some leagues I'm in that are kind of deep, and it may not have happened everywhere. It may have just been a couple that I was in, but people bailed on Brandon Cooks, in some leagues already. If he's available, he's a guy that I was drafting in the 7th or 8th round of drafts all summer, and he ended up you got unlucky. He had a quad injury before week 1, but it looks like he's coming back from that now. You got Will Fuller doing the Will Fuller thing. He's already hurt. And we talked about this in the preseason, right? Fuller was the big bet and it was great. But Brandon Cooks was the guy that was probably the most likely to be able to finish the season and can still bring some heat, on the outside. Nobody has had more targets with over 2 steps of separation, in the last 5 years down the field over 20 yards than Brandon Cooks. He's the number 1. So he can still do it.
They're going to play Pittsburgh this week, so it could be a tough matchup, but a great buy low opportunity after that. It's the Vikings and the Jags in the following 2 weeks.
And you're going to want him in your lineup in both of those. I'm not necessarily that scared of him against Pittsburgh, this week. This last week he had the Ravens, and it wasn't like it was great or anything, but he was the lead guy, and hell, Fuller could barely, Fuller was out there, but they weren't using Fuller. It was like Fuller at that point was just a decoy.
If you're looking to stream low-end tight ends, Cincinnati must be the place to go, because we got one who's there and one who used to be there. The guy who's there is Drew Sample, because CJ Uzoma is done for the year, and Sample saw 8 targets on Thursday night. And the guy who used to be there is now in Jacksonville in Tyler Eifert. So, a couple of other guys, Dwayne, who are free essentially if you're dying out there, and maybe a 2 tight end league or premium. And yeah,
here's the thing. If he takes over Uzoma's role, which it looked like he did, I mean, Azoma the week before ran a route on 71% of plays. That's right in the range where it becomes, you're like, okay, this is okay for a tight end. Like you love the 80 percenters and like 90 percenters, like they're like unicorns, right? They're really hard to find. But if you look at Sample, if he goes into that role and he obviously has, a little bit of chemistry with Burrow, and here's what we're seeing, right? So, I mean, we know AJ Green is getting the majority, of the targets. And if he starts to look more like AJ Green, that'll continue. But if he doesn't, they could go away from him. He could get hurt. There's all sorts of things. We know Tyler Boyd is next. But after that, what do we know? Like, okay, we heard all this stuff about Auden Tate. Well, he's inactive. We got Mike Thomas, who flashed. Mike Thomas flashed. So he showed a little, right? So in super, super deep leagues, Mike Thomas might be like a speculative, like just thinking ahead if AJ Green gets hurt kind of thing. Because T. Higgins is still a rookie. And then John Ross, it's like, he's just not getting anything, dude. It's like, I feel like they're just moving on. So this last week, John Ross, his routes per dropback dropped down to 32%. Whereas the week before he was at 84%. So they clearly said, we're just going to rotate you. So they're not tied to him. So what that tells me, kind of back to Sample, there could be a scenario where he's the second target in the offense. If AJ Green goes down, Tyler Boyd, your one, Sample could be the two. And Sample right now, if I had to put a bet, I bet he's the three in the passing, in the targets, in the pecking order right now. And this is a team that runs a lot of plays. I mean, they run a lot of plays. It's similar to what we talked about, with some of the other teams earlier. So I think Sample has a chance to be as high as the number 2 target in the offense. I think is number 3 worst case scenario, which is basically what Azoma, was, on track to do this last week as well. So again, you don't have to go spend a lot of money on the guy, but you can get him pretty cheap. He kind of falls in that same range as Jordan Akins for me.
Let's just recap quickly, Dwayne. If people are tuning in and they want to know your top 5 running backs to come off the board on the waiver wire, who are you prioritizing? Just a 1 through 5 list.
Yep. Number 1 is Darrell Henderson. Number 2 is Jerick McKinnon. Number 3 is Mike Davis. Again, you got to know your roster. It's really like if you've got McCaffrey, or if you're just looking for somebody to get you through 3 or 4 weeks and you've got other plans you think that are going to, show up for you, then, he's the perfect guy. He's going to be an RB2, for the weeks that he's out there. And then I have Josh Kelly at number 4, Devonta Freeman at number 5.
If you maybe are a guy with Carson Wentz as your quarterback, you're looking to bail, although they've got the Bengals this week. Some guys on the waiver wire, Dwayne, Ryan Tannehill, Gardner Minshew, Joe Burrow. What do you think of these guys?
I mean, Tannehill, are we ready to just say it? Like, get out from under Adam Gase and you look great. And it's 2 years in a row. I mean, he did it all of last year, and now he's done it pretty much for 2 games this year. The only thing I didn't like about Tennessee this weekend is they went back. I was so happy. I thought they were done with this. They went back to that god-awful grind it to a halt pace. Like, I got to look so I can tell everybody. But, like, the number of plays that they actually ran, pull it up right now. So where is it? Tennessee. I don't remember off the top of my head. Yeah. So in week 1, 81 plays. And this last week, it got close at the end. They weren't on track for this. It ended up at 62, which is just below average. But I remember looking at it in the game at, like in the third quarter, and it was even worse than that. But the game script kind of pushed things a little bit more, their way at the end. Dude, what is up with their defense? They can't stop anybody.
Yeah, and you thought they were going to get more of a pass rush now, bringing in Clowney.
Yeah. So yeah, I think Tannehill is a guy that he's just showing he can do it with less. And if their defense is this bad, it's not like they played world-beating offenses, Drake. They played the Broncos, and then they played the Jags.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think their defense is going to be good. I mean, it's obviously going to get better, but I think that helps Tannehill.
Minshew is just swag city, man. You kind of just want him in your lineup.
Yeah, you want to just draft him in the first round so you can get, free beer. Yeah, Minshew and Tannehill are the two. Like, I would put them at the top of the list of typically when now if Burrow's there, Burrow's the top. It's Burrow, then I would have Tannehill, then I would have Minshew. If you want to argue Minshew over Tannehill, I'm okay. Here, they both can give you value on the ground. They're both showing to be efficient. I think Tannehill looks better than Minshew right now. I think Tannehill is playing like at a super high level. Now, Minshew is on a team, though, that could have to pass all the time. Tannehill, on the weeks he does pass, you would rather own him than Minshew, but we could still run into those days where they just kind of grind things out.
Minshew is like white trash Aaron Rodgers. Like, you can give you a little something on the ground, and he's just throwing a ball everywhere. I like him, man. He's fun. Let's see here. So if you're watching on YouTube, and we can see that a bazillion of you are, make sure, again, you're talking to us in the comments, letting us know who you're adding and dropping this week, and you're going to hit that subscribe button, man. Just like if you watch your kids' videos, and they're like opening toys or something, or it's some annoying girl. This is what my daughter watches now. It's like fake videos of girls singing Disney songs in elaborate outfits. I don't know who's paying for these or who's doing the technical work, but we could use you on this show. So if you're into fantasy, come hit us up, slide into our DMs. All right, Dwayne, before we get out of here, let's hit a couple of these questions. All right, Ryan Falk wants to know, John Brown and CMC for Mixon and Lockett. Is that a good trade? I'm on the CMC side.
John Brown and who?
So he's going to get McCaffrey.
I see it in the chat room. Okay, so John Brown and CMC for Mixon and Lockett, and he has CMC. Man, these kind of things are so tough, Drake, because we just don't know how long CMC is going to be out. Like, if you told me it's for sure a minimum of 4 weeks and maybe 6 weeks, I would do this deal, right? But if there's a range of outcomes and it could be 1 to 2 weeks on the low end and McCaffrey's back, then I'm not doing it. So it really depends on how he ends up. Yeah. Oh, so he's getting Mixon. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what we said. Yeah, he said he was on the CMC side. Yeah. But he would be giving away CMC is the way I took it all along. I wouldn't give away again. Man, I don't know, dude. I'm not an injury like prognosticator. I hate to give you advice on that, to be honest. And all of a sudden CMC's back in 2 weeks and it sucks. But if he's out for 4 to 6 weeks, I would do it.
Deep League, add Gaskin or Jeff Wilson Jr.
If you need someone to plug in for a couple of weeks to win and you want a shot at scoring a couple touchdowns and a good offense, it's Wilson. If you literally have nothing at running back and you just need somebody to throw in your RB2 spot for the rest of the year until something else happens, which hopefully is not the case, it's Myles Gaskin, because he's the guy that he has the role. It's his. We don't like the role. We don't like the team. Wilson, we know he's only going to get that work until Coleman and then, Mostert. Either one of those come back, he immediately phases down. He goes down the list. When they're both back, he's out. So for me with Wilson, basically it's more of I'm just trying to score. I'd like to score 20 points, next week. Who gives me the most upside to do that? It's Wilson.
Oh, this guy, Robert, listening in the chat room, is in just the skankiest of skank leagues. Half point PPR. I lost McCaffrey and Mostert, still have James Conner. Who would you pick up until Mostert is back between, get this, Dion Lewis, Jeff Wilson, or Frank Gore?
And it's until CMC's back or until Mostert's back?
Or Mostert.
Yeah, I would go with Jeff Wilson if I'm just trying to get until Mostert gets back. If I feel like I need to cover the CMC thing, I might lean to Dion Lewis, but I'm not heavily leaning that way. I would go Mostert, especially with you already. I would go Wilson, especially with you already owning Mostert. Because again, if Mostert comes back too soon from his injury and he gets dinged again, well, you've already got Wilson on. You can leave Wilson on your roster for 1 week once Mostert comes back.
I can answer this one. This is easily rest of the season. 4-point passing touchdowns, Matt Ryan or Cam Newton. The answer there is going to be Cam Newton because he's going to score 6-point rushing touchdowns for you. All right. I love this trade question.
I take Cam Newton in any format over Matt Ryan. No problem.
I love trade questions. Would you trade Nick Chubb and Antonio Gibson for Jonathan Taylor. So basically,
Nick
which side would you rather
Chubb
be on?
and Antonio Gibson for Jonathan Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that one's really close. So here's the thing, like with Gibson, like let me pull this up real quick, Drake. So
He's
with
coming
Gibson,
on a little bit, but he's on a terrible team.
he is on a terrible team. So this past, so here's where we're at now. Listen to how people think coaches don't have plans. Listen to this. Like you can't like make this up. 40% of snaps to Gibson, 40% to McKissick, and 20% to Barber. And I hear some people say, man, predicting shares isn't a good way to predict, an offense. Like it's a much better way than just saying, I think he's going to get this many carries. And then I'm going to add it all up and see what the percentages are. Because coaches, by nature, right, especially if you've got these split situations, you can see how clearly, like that doesn't just happen by accident. 40, 40, 20. Guess what? In close snap percentages, where the game's within 3, 30% Gibson, 40% McKissick, 30% Barber.
Mm-hmm.
In a passing situation, it's 40% Gibson, 51% McKissick, and 7% Barber. Run snaps, like 40% Gibson, 25% McKissick, 35% Barber. Like they are literally saying, oh, next running, get Barber out there. It's like, it's all based on situations and how many touches the guys have had. But this last week, we did see an increase, for Gibson. And here's the problem for Gibson, though. He's not getting any of the 4-minute offense. That's all Barber, 90%. He's not getting the third and fourth down and long plays, only 7%. That's our buddy McKissick, 93%. He's also not getting the 2-minute offense, 71% McKissick. So how did he get more carries this last week? Game script. Once they got the game, that game was never – they kept the game – they got the game close at the end. It wasn't as out of hand, as what we saw in the first half last week. Now they came back against, the Eagles. But a lot of it comes back to game script. And so I think he's going to still be game script dependent. Now, I do believe he has upside. So really what you're asking is, Chubb, versus Hunt. Versus Taylor. I feel like they're the same thing, Drake. I mean, that's what I think you have. I think you got, two guys that are the same thing. I think Nyheim Hines, Taylor got all the work this last week because they were blowing the Vikings' doors off. They could have sleptwalked to a game. I already told you they basically rested. They didn't make T.Y. Hilton play unless they were passing. So in that kind of game script, Taylor got what we would expect. So to me, I'm probably going to stick with Chubb, Drake, because I still like the upside of Gibson to go with him.
A couple of folks asking about Keelan Cole. Specifically, one guy wants to know, they're both on the wire, Keelan Cole or Laviska Shenault. So you can kind of touch on the Jags wideouts.
Yeah, Cole gets zero love, but, he's clearly the second receiver from a snaps, from a routes, percentage, and he's been leading the team in targets. He's a guy that Matt Waldman has liked for a long time and has said multiple years, hey, watch out for Keelan Cole. And look, here he is.
I put him in my waiver wire, little 5-minute piece.
Yeah, I wouldn't spend a ton on him, but I think they're settled on what these roles are. I think it's Cole playing the Z underneath, right? It's, or you can call it, the split end. Then you've got, your flanker, your split end is Chark. And then, your flanker, which is outside the tight end typically, gets to line up off the line of scrimmage is Cole. And then you have your slot / guy, you move all over the place, and that's Shenault. And I think that's what they're going with. So unless Cole gets hurt, I think he's going to continue to have some value. I think it's one of those situations, Drake, where it's kind of capped because they spread it around to everybody. Like they don't even when you're the leader on team, it's not like, oh man, 35% of the targets. It's like, oh, you got 17%, of the targets. And that's Jay Gruden's offense outside of the years that he had, AJ Green. He's been a very, spread it out even, make everybody respect all the players on the field, stretch the field out. That's kind of his scheme. So I don't expect to see, and that's kind of worrisome for DJ Chark because we had hoped Chark could really take a step forward and maybe be like an AJ Green, get 25, 30% of the targets, and it's not happening.
Dan Ramirez wants to know, half-point PPR, would you trade Jonathan Taylor for Nick Chubb and Deontay Johnson?
Yes.
Yeah, I would too.
Yep. I would.
I don't think people know how good Deontay Johnson is and what he's going to be by the end of the season.
Yeah, and look, we still haven't seen like a normal script for the Browns. So if we look at the Browns this year, in games where the score is still within 3, or in snaps where the score is still within 3, 82% of the snaps to Nick Chubb, 18% to Kareem Hunt. So passing down snaps, Hunt's getting in there. It's 51% Chubb, 45% Hunt. Pure running snaps, 55% for Chubb, 38% for Hunt. But how is Hunt getting to 38%? Because he's the guy getting on the field in the 4-minute offense, 57% of the carries versus 29%. Now, third down and long, 2-minute offense, all Hunts, like we talked about in the preseason, 79% and 100%. So if the Browns are getting blown out, Nick Chubb's going to have a bad week. But guess what? If the Colts get down early, Jonathan Taylor's going to have a bad week because it's going to be Nyheim Hines. And we've also seen with the Colts in week 1, they weren't even down. They just decided the best way to beat the Vikings is, for whatever reason, to let Nyheim Hines be our main back. And I think we're still going to get weeks like that. And we're going to be sitting there going, well, what the hell, man? So I feel like there's risk with Chubb and Taylor as far as having game scripts to where they could be phased out of a game. And they both carry similar upside. I think in games, what I will say for Taylor, I had hoped that he would really have more upside than Chubb, like late in games, like to finish off games. But guess what? Guess what Frank Reich did? He's a true Doug Peterson guy. So Frank Reich this last weekend, guess who he put out there to really grind the victory away? Jordan Wilkins. Remember Jordan Wilkins?
Yeah, I was going to say, man, he's getting some love. Somebody asked me about him.
He got 100% of the 4-minute offense. Jonathan Taylor got 0. So basically, they want to keep Taylor healthy. Now, if the game's closer, that could go back more to Taylor, just like what we talked about with Chubb. So my point is they're both similar, and Nick Chubb's a better player. He's proven what he can do. And I like Jonathan Taylor, but Nick Chubb is the best pure runner in the league over the last 3 years. So Jonathan Taylor still has to live up to that. And I don't see a way where all of a sudden Jonathan Taylor just gets all the work. He's got Nyheim Hines, so he's going to have the same some similar problems to what Chubb has. All
right, Dwayne, rapid fire before we get out of here. Would you trade Deshaun Watson for Cam Newton, 4-point touchdown passes?
You're giving away Watson and you're picking up Newton?
Yes.
Man. Good.
Boy, how things have changed in 3 weeks.
Why is this not like rapid fire like it should be? No, I'm still going to stick with Deshaun Watson, and here's why. I think Watson still gives me the most flexibility. He can win in every way. And I think, again, it's back to what do we have here? We've got a new receiver in Brandon Cooks. You've got Will Fuller, who's injured. You got a new back and David Johnson. I still don't think this offense has shown what it can do yet. It's also had 2 very tough matchups, and they're going to get another one this week against the Steelers. So I haven't gone and I haven't studied, the schedule over the next 3 weeks yet. Like, I'm not there yet. I'm about to, though, because we have bye weeks coming up. But yeah, I'm going to hang on, to Deshaun Watson. And that could be wrong. Like, it was a tougher call than I would expect. Like you said, 3 weeks ago, we went, what are you talking about? Deshaun Watson. But
Josh, man. Okay, here we go. Josh Kelly, Antonio Gibson, or Leonard Fournette?
Wait, out of the 3?
Yep, pick one.
Leonard Fournette.
All right. Half-point PPR flex, Chark, Judy, Boyd.
I'm going to stick with Chark. I still, and here's why. I mean, Boyd disappeared for us week 1, and then he reappeared last week. But it took a ton of plays to get him to his volume. It wasn't because he had a huge target share. So I still think, we got to see what's up with Boyd because AJ Green is like getting tons of the work. And I think with Judy, I want no part of Jeff Driscoll. I love Jerry Jeudy, but I want nothing to do with Driscoll. So those 2 guys are out.
Can I drop Chris Herndon?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a bazillion guys on the waiver wire. you can get that way. I mean, we could do this all night, folks.
Yeah, Chris Herndon has to block 36% of the time he's out there on a pass play. That's the most in the league. That's his problem. Adam Gase wants to have his, probably his top weapon with everybody hurt, blocking.
So, of course, you read Dwayne's work at Pro Football Focus. That's pff.com. Also at establishtherun.com. What do we got on tap this week?
Got the utilization work coming out. So I'll be hitting on the backs, all the receivers, the tight ends. And so that'll hit. Got to stay up and work on it a little bit tonight, but I have to get some sleep. I got a long day at work tomorrow. So I'll probably wake up early and try to finish it. And hopefully I'll have it over to the editors so it can drop, tomorrow afternoon. And if not, it would be first thing, the following morning. So that's it. Oh, and tomorrow I'll be on the score with Justin Boone. So if you want to hear, he's going to fire away all sorts of questions around utilization. So
cool.
That's what we'll be talking.
If you want to read my stuff, I do a Drake's Takes column over at fightingchancefantasy.com. You can see that. I put it out on Fridays. If I'm not too hungover, then we'll get it Saturday morning. Well, whatever you're going to do.
And so next week I'll be back on the PFF pod. So they've asked me to do, if I'll do every other week. So I'll be on with Ian. So I'll be doing a show with every other week. It'll be Ian and then you, Drake, while I'm also writing an article. So Tuesday nights are going to be insane.
Why don't you have him drop his little helicopter in over on this show, and then we could just do a little three-way dance, and we could just put the show out on two separate feeds. Boom, the show's done. Save you some time.
Funny. That'd be pretty funny. We could probably get him to do a helicopter once.
Let's get his ass in here, man. I like his stuff. He does a great job. He's does a better job at being Brian Drake than what Brian Drake is doing this show.
I love what he's doing on that show. It's an easy listen. He gets into the deep stuff, but he's still very entertaining too. So I think he does a great job.
Absolutely. So folks, again, if you're on YouTube, hit subscribe, leave us some comments. Let us know who you're picking up on the waiver wire. Follow him at Dwayne McFarland. I am at Drake Fantasy. The show is at FF Hustle. We appreciate everybody hanging out tonight, listening on iTunes. Leave that 5-star review. We'll see you next week when, who knows, we'll be telling you to pick up Frank Gore and some guy who's pumping gas in New Jersey. Take it easy.